just sit back and listen and appreciate, I think inshallah will be beneficial for us. So it's something light to do on the weekends that we have off, inshallah ta'ala. And so long as they continue to be on YouTube with the links that I've provided, inshallah ta'ala. So by having our focus on the grammar, the reason why we utilize this methodology is because a lot of the Arabic language, as I've tried to show you through the last couple of weeks, a lot of the Arabic language is lost in the translation. And it's not something that can be found in just the translation of the word. Rather, there's so many enhanced meanings found in just understanding the infrastructure of the language. And by learning this methodology, with the help of the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, you will be able to really pick up anything in the Quran and be able to utilize the formulas, the mechanisms that you learn here to appreciate and at least understand where to begin in terms of understanding the words of the Quran. So it's kind of like math. You know, when you go to physics or any mathematics, some of you may be engineers here, or everyone of us is studying math at some point. The focus is understanding the formulas, and you want to memorize the formulas because when you understand and memorize the formulas and how the formulas work through practice, then you can be given any amount of variables and consonants and numbers, and you can formulate an understanding, formulate an answer based on understanding the formulas and how the formulas work. Similarly, understanding the mechanism of the language, understanding the grammar and the stuff in particular, will allow us to, once we understand and memorize it and comprehend it and how it works, we can take any word, any sentence, anything, inshallah, and utilize the mechanisms that we learn in this class, inshallah, and at least know how to understand it, beginning to that ta'ala. So quickly, inshallah, we'd like to do a quick review of what we've covered up until this point. The first thing we discussed was the three categories of speech in the Arabic language, the three types of words that you'll find in the Arabic language. And we know in the English language you'll find 8, and those 8 are summarized into 3. So what are the 3 types of words that we'll find in the Arabic language? Number 1, ism. Number 2, fi'l. And number 3, harf, inshallah. Ism. What is an ism? A basic description of ism. Person, picture, thing, and noun. Basically, it's something along those lines. Now, fi'l. What's a fi'l? It's a verb, and in the verb is you understand a time in which the action has occurred. So you know whether it's past, present, or future, based on understanding its formula. And al-harf, what is a harf? Harf, lughawi. So sometimes when you study books of fiqh or books of any Islamic studies in Arabic language, you'll say, ما معنى هذا؟ معنى لغوي ومعنى اصطلاحي. Okay? معنى, what's the meaning of it? Just by its basic description. What's its basic meaning? So the basic meaning of harf is letter, right? Harf is letter. But you'll find that there are so many words. It's actually a word. It's not a letter. So harf by basic definition means letter. So alif is harf, lam is harf, sin is harf. These all mean letter. But in islalahiyan, in the Arabic language, meaning the technical terminology, technical language, harf means any word in the Arabic language that does not fit into, that's the basic description. If you study Ajrumiya, you'll see that harf literally means anything that doesn't fit into the category of ism or fi'l. So everything else is harf. But also, how you understand what harf is, harf requires an ism or fi'l to make sense. You can't have harf by itself. You need to have harf with something else, an ism or fi'l, in order for it to make sense. So for example, to in English is a harf. I went to the masjid, right? To. That word to, if I just said to, it doesn't make sense. You don't know what I'm talking about. I have to say to the masjid. And so now you can kind of get a basic idea of what I'm talking about. So ism, fi'l, and harf. Now, we're going into the details of the ism. And there are 4 major components of the ism that we need to comprehend and understand. And the reason why this is important is because when we start putting words together, whether they be isms together, or ism with a fi'l together, or ism with a harf together, we need to know these categories, these components, these characteristics of the ism in order for us to comprehend putting words together. Okay? So, what are the 4 major characteristics of the ism that we need to know? The first one that we studied. Yes, definiteness. So, al-ma'rifah or definiteness. Recognizing whether it is definite or indefinite. So, how do you recognize whether it's definite or indefinite in the Arabic language? Alif lam in front means what? Definite. What happens? What is the sign of indefinite? Gender. You said it last week. Gender. So gender. So it's either male or female, or masculine or feminine is a better term. Masculine or feminine. And this is important too, because in the English language you may not see that in a word. But in Arabic, you need to know whether it's masculine or feminine, because when you put words together, you need to be able to match these different things, and you'll see that later, inshallah. So how do you tell that something is masculine? Well, the first thing you do is what? You look for the signs of femininity. And there are three major signs of femininity. What's the first one and the most common one and the most obvious one? Tamma. So an alim is someone who, what? What's an alim? Someone who has knowledge. Okay? So alim is a male who has knowledge. So now it's more specific. Now that we're learning femininity and masculinity, we know that alim is not just anybody, but alim is a male who has knowledge. So how do you tell who is a female who has knowledge? Alimah, mashallah. How do you say male teacher? Mu'allim. How do you say female teacher? It's easy. Mu'allimah. Right? You add the tab at the end. Okay? The other signs are less common, but they're important too, is like having alif that comes out. So like sawdat, right? That means a female who is black, or bayda. Bayda is a female who is white with a alif maqsoor at the end. Okay? Which means the looking thing with alif on top of it, right? It has a thorough in it. It's like cruising, it's like the surfboard alif, right? That's alif maqsoor. We'll just call it the surfboard alif. Okay? So these are different signs. You can review that, inshallah. There are three major signs. If the signs are not there, then you assume that it is masculine. And there are exceptions to those rules, both having the sign and being masculine, and not having the sign and being feminine. But those things are exceptions to the rule. Number three, the third thing that we need to know about the ism is what? Plurality. And that's today's topic, inshallah. And what's the fourth characteristic of ism that we need to know? The endings, the i'rab, or the endings of it. And when you get into the endings, So this one means broken. I mean, this means sound or broken. Okay? So mufrad is single. So we've already studied some singular words from your vocabulary list. Can someone give me a word that we've studied in your Quranic vocabulary list? Kitabun. Kitabun. Alhamdulillah, that's an excellent one. Kitabun. Anyone else? Maybe I want a few words. Qalamun. Qalamun. What does qalamun mean? Pen, mashallah. Kitabun means what? Qalamun means pen. Some other words. Rajulun. Ajrun. What does ajrun mean? Means reward, mashallah. Ajrun.
Rajulun.
What's that one?
Rajul.
Rajulun, man.
Rajulun, mashallah. What does rajulun mean?
Man.
Rajulun. Rajulun, mashallah. Excellent. Now, I'm going to take every one of these words and turn it into muthanna. And it's very simple to do. Okay? How do you turn every single word? And this is every single ism, no matter what, without exception. You can make them into dual by doing one simple step. You add alif and then nun at the end. So, what is it here? We have kitab, bani, kitabani, kitab. Bani. Kitaban. Kitaban. And you will always have a kasra at the end of those. Go ahead.
24 هي فتحة.
Yeah, sorry. Fatha. Right? Kitabani. And this will always have a kasra at the end. Alright? Always. Kitabani. However, this will change when you study I'rab. Okay? Qalaman. How do you turn qalaman into?
Qalamani.
Qalamani. Right? Excellent. Qalamani. Qalamani. Okay, I'm going to put the harakat, okay? Actually, okay? Qalamani. And so on and so forth. Every single word, every single ism. If you want to say that they're true of that particular word, you add alif nun at the end. And you say ani. So qalamani, rajulani, habibatani, habibani, etc. And there's actually a very good dua or good hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that demonstrates this, inshallah. So as you're writing this, inshallah, I'll give you a hadith at the end, inshallah. So go ahead and write this down. meaning words that are light on your tongue. There are two words that are light on your tongue. كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان, but also ثقيلتان. What's the signal of ثقيلة? ثقيلة. ما شاء الله. ثقيلة. ثقيلة. Right? And that's the feminine version of ثقيل. Go ahead.
Someone who doesn't know the meaning of the lisani, how do they know that's not a full word?
So that's going to be our next discussion, inshallah. So you need to know the types of plural, and we'll talk about that in a moment, okay? Inshallah. على اللسان. The reason why you don't know it's plural, well, there's a few reasons. The first reason is, as I told you, duals. If it's a dual word, it'll have a certain sign that indicates it's jar. And the dual words, this is why I want to make it complex. The dual words, the sign of jar is not a kasra. The sign of dual words is actually a ya. It would be al lisayn. But we'll talk about that later, inshallah, and when we study Arab. Okay? So there's a few reasons why you know it's not dual. Okay? ثقيلتان means, what does it mean? Heavy. So it's the opposite of khafif, it's thaqil. And when you study vocabulary, it's very helpful to study the opposite. When you put them together, when you make your note card, put them together so you know the opposites. So it increases your understanding of that word, and it also expands your ability to use the language. So it means heavy. Okay? Ala, what does ala mean? We just learned it. Upon. Al-mizan. What does mizan mean? This is the same thing as this. Because we know that since it follows ala, it needs to be in the state of ja, and there are certain signs that indicate a word is in the state of ja. We don't know those signs yet, but I'm telling you, trust me, inshallah, that this particular sign is the kasra. So mizan means what?
Scale.
It means scale. So when you wake up in the morning to weigh yourself, you step on that scale. But what scale is this one referring to? This hadith referring to?
Day of judgment.
The scale of the day of judgment. So, how many of you guys have heard this hadith before? Raise your hands. Alhamdulillah. So what are the two words that it's talking about? Two statements. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim. And the meaning of the hadith is actually those words. So, كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان على الميزان subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim. So the Prophet is teaching us that saying subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim is what? كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان على الميزان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. And سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم is actually the subject put at the end. So what is he saying here? He's saying that saying سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم is very light on your tongue. It's easy to say, but it's very heavy on the scale of the day of judgment. Okay? So alhamdulillah, this hadith, if you memorize it, subhanallah wa bihamdihi subhanallah al-azim, memorize it, it'll teach you a lot of things. And when we study Arab and all that stuff, it'll help you differentiate between them. Right? So that is dual words. You can write this down, inshallah, and I'll go into jam I'm going to go with an easy example. So, Muslim. Muslimun. Muslimun. And qalam. Qalamun. Qalamun. What's the meaning of Muslimun? Muslim is someone who submits to Allah Ta'ala, right? A Muslim, a believer in Allah. Muslimun is a male or female? Male. Okay, excellent. Alhamdulillah. Qalamun. What's the meaning of qalamun? It's pen. There's a basic principle to understand whether something is broken or sound or broken. And the very simple principle is, if the original letters stick together, meaning they're not changed in any way, when it becomes plural, it's called sound. You have to think of it as a family. Family that prays together, sticks together, right? A family that stays together, it's a sound family, mashallah. Okay? So, we use the example of Muslim. What is the plural of Muslimun? Muslimuna. So what you add to Muslim is the una at the end. Una. Right? Muslimuna. So it's actually Muslim. Muslimuna. Okay? So these three letters, Mim, Sin, Lam, Mim, are they broken or are they stuck together in the plural? They're stuck together. Therefore, it's considered sound. Why? Because in the plural, the family stuck together. It's a strong family. It did not break up. How do you make something a broken family? How do you make a broken family? So how do you break a broken family? Either the family disappears, the son runs away, the daughter runs away, or, another, person comes in and joins the family, right? So the son brings a daughter that the mother doesn't approve of, right? So there's a broken family now, right? But we ask Allah alone, right? So a broken family, there's two ways you can break up a family. Number one, either the family there's a letter disappears, or you bring in people to split up the family. So, for example, qalam. And actually, the letters, in the cases of Arabic, the letters never disappear, but what happens is you add members into the family that are not welcome there, but they become plural. So in the case of qalamun, we have qaf, lam, mim. The letters will always stay, but what happens is you bring in, the lam is the wife has another male, the family has alif, right? And then the husband says, forget you, I got examples of broken plurals. So either you add letters to the original words, the original letters that split them apart, or the original letters disappear, becomes broken. Okay? Anytime the original letters stick together, when it becomes plural, it is sound. And it's actually, alhamdulillah, very easy. Sound plurals are very easy because there's only one way that you can turn, or only two ways you can turn a single word into a sound plural. It depends whether it's mudhakkar or mu'annath, whether it's male or female. And we'll get into that on the other side, inshallah. Go ahead and write this down, inshallah. And that's why you really just need to know whether or not that signal becomes sound or it gets broken. And if it becomes broken, if it becomes taksir, there are so many different ways it can become taksir. In the Arabic language, there are so many different ways, different words you can taksir. The only way you can know what is its plural form is by memorizing its plural form. So from qalamun to aqlamun, there's no real methodology of knowing what its plural will be. There's no, you can't, how do you know it's not qalamun and qalamatun, etc.? There's certain reasons, because this really only exists for human beings with aql. Okay, don't worry about that. The point is, you don't know, in order for you to recognize something's plural, you just need to memorize it. So when you study a single word, you should try to learn how to make it plural. And usually when you do, you'll learn its plural along with it. So qalamun, you just know that it's a qalamun because you studied it and you memorized it. There's no method of knowing that besides memorization, unfortunately. And unfortunately, the majority of words take on the jama' taksir, broken plural. The majority of words are broken plurals. So it's hard to really know how to make it single, etc. The only way you'll know that is by practice and practice and practice. The more you read, the more you recognize patterns, because there are patterns. There are patterns, but there's so many of them, it's pointless to memorize it. And all you need to do is memorize it with its plural form. Okay? So qalamun is aqlamun, kitab is kutubun, masjidun is masajidun. Okay? Right? Kitabun, kutubun. Broken plurals. There are so many different ways that a broken plural can present that it is impossible to memorize it. So you just need to memorize it case by case. So whenever you study something's word, you need to know what its plural is. It'll help you. Okay? However, when it comes to sound plurals, you'll soon realize that plurals that typically come from that are either words that are ism fa'il. Remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about how you can turn a verb into a noun. So how do you turn alima into someone who does alima? What does alima mean? To know. So how do you turn alima into a noun? Alima is a verb. How do you turn it into a noun? Alim. The overwhelming majority of those ism are sound. So Muslim is actually someone who performs aslama. And when you learn these in sarf, you'll recognize that all of these take on a sound plural. But at this stage, the most important thing is when you read the Quran and you see a word, the most important thing is recognizing that a word is plural or if it's dual or if it's single. And if it's plural, you need to try to figure out its single. So when you see muslimuna, muslimatun, raki'at, sajidat, when you see these words in the Quran, you know right away that it's a sound plural, and you know the only way to turn it into a mufrad, into a single, is by removing the atom and adding the tab marbuta. And removing the una and making it the sound plural. So the most important thing at this stage is recognizing a plural and figuring out how to turn it into a mufrad so that you can look it up in the dictionary. Okay? And the only way you can recognize plurals, broken plurals, is by practice. It's reading with the teacher and looking it up in the dictionary, finding patterns. And that will come with time. As you build your vocabulary, you will recognize that this is a single, this is a plural, this is a plural. And that's why it's the most difficult part for me in particular. Because when you're reading a book without the spiel, and you're reading it, and then you're like, okay, is this a single or is it plural? How am I translating this to myself? And then you figure out how you look it up in the dictionary. So that's going to be the most difficult part. It's going to take time. Any questions? Very simple. questions before that, inshallah. I'm just going to double check real quick. While I'm waiting for that, inshallah, the brother brought up some interesting questions on this for clarification. It'll help all of us. He said that in this one, the ta marbuta disappeared, so why is it not considered broken? Well, the reason is because ta marbuta, as we discussed before, is a sign of femininity, and it's not actually the original word. The original word is Muslim. You add the ta marbuta to it to make it feminine. So the ta marbuta is exempt from that ruling of the family. Ta marbuta is, an adopted child. It's not as important. So ta marbuta is, it can go away, no one will miss it. Okay? So ta marbuta does not exist in the original, that discussion of breaking apart, missing letters, etc. Ta marbuta is extra. It's actually a sign of femininity. Second question was, the brother had brought up, can't you say that all the long vowels or the long letters can be removed, and that's one of the patterns that you find? And I basically told them, alhamdulillah, that's excellent analysis, and what you'll find is when you're reading more and you're seeing singles and plurals, broken plurals, you're going to recognize different patterns. And there are patterns there, but there's so many of them that it's hard to memorize all of them, but there are some that are very common. For example, now I'll bring it to the other side, inshallah. Masjid. Masjid and maktab. Masjid, what is a masjid? A masjid is a place, a makan of sajda, right? Where the sajda happens. Sajda means to make prostration, right? Masjid is a place where that happens. And then you'll learn this word in when we study Saf, okay? But anyways, masjid, maktab. What is there that's common between the two of them? What's common between the two of them is that they're four-letter words. There's a fatha and then a sukoon, and then there's two letters that follow after it, after the sukoon. Anytime you see this pattern, almost always you'll see it's plural like this. It fills a pattern, so it becomes masajid or makatib, mal'ab, mal'abun, mim, lam. There's a mim and a lam. Sukoon, and then there's two letters after the sukoon, becomes mala'ib. So there's certain patterns you're going to recognize, but they're so extensive that it's a waste of time to learn them at this stage. Okay? So trying to recognize patterns is part of the fun, but don't bog yourself down with that. It'll come with experience. So, inshallah, if you guys turn to page in your book, there's some practice verses kind of identifying some of these examples of plural. If you look at, just kind of go through the book, you have Rasulun. Rasulun, its plural is Rusulun. This is Jam'a Taksir. You have Qalamun, Aqlamun, Masjidun, Masajidun, Kitabun, Kutubun, Yawmun, Ayyamun, Baytun, Buyutun. All of these are examples of broken plurals. You know that bayt's plural is buyut because you studied it and you memorized it. You memorized it. So that's extremely important. Just recognizing broken plurals with their single component. Then you have some practice verses on page 28. So some practice verses of sound masculine plural, meaning mudhakkar salim. So wal kafiruna hum al-zalimuna. So you know that kafirun is a plural. What's the single of kafirun? Kafir. What does kafir mean? We have it here, your little side table on the left side, just because this is training wheels. Normally you would search this in the dictionary or something of that nature, or you would recognize that kafir is the ism al-fa'il of kafara, and you go and you search kafara, what it means, and it means to disbelieve or to cover up, right? So kafir is someone who covers up, but in the context of Islam, it means someone who covers up the truth and disbelieves in Allah Ta'ala. So al-kafirun hum al-zalimun. What's the single of zalimun? Zalim. And you know that zalim is the ism al-fa'il of zalama, and you know zalama means to oppress, right? Or to commit wrongdoing, or to sin. Then al-mu'minuna. Al-mu'minuna, what's the single? Mu'min. Right? Al-khasirun. What's the single of khasirun? Khasir. You know that khasir is the ism al-fa'il of khasara. Khasara means to do wrong. Alright? Or to lose, I'm sorry. To lose. So, khasirun. What's the opposite of khasir? Fa'iz. Fa'iz, someone who What's the plural of fa'iz? Fa'izun. Fa'izun, khasirun, fa'izun, etc. So those are some examples in the Quran, and you can look up the ayah and look at the context, study it, inshallah. Jama' mu'annath salim. So feminine, sound feminine plurals. Wal-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat. Right? What's the single of mu'minat? Mu'mina. Mu'mina means someone who believes. Lahum jannatun na'im. Jannat is the plural of jannah, tamarbuta. And even though this is a inanimate object, which means garden, it still takes feminine form. And this is just through the usage of the Arabs. So jannah, and jannah means garden. And in our context, al-jannah is paradise. Tilka al-ayat. Al-ayat, what's the single of ayat? Ayah. So now you're making these connections of common words that we hear throughout our lives. Now broken plurals. And this, and you'll come across ashab al-jannah. And you say ashab al-jannah, it's not a sound plural, it's not a sound masculine plural, it's not a dual. I don't know if it's plural or if it's single. See, you can't tell from it unless you know what it means and you experienced it before. So ashab, you can say it's either single or it's a broken plural. You don't know. The only way you know is by, you saw it in your book in page 28, that the single is sahib or sahaba. Sahaba, right? Which means companion. What's the plural of companion? Ashab. And you only know this by memorization. There's no way of telling when you see it. Okay? And this is why it's difficult sometimes. Ashab al-jannati hum al-fa'izun. Now we saw fa'izun, and fa'izun is what? Fa'iz, right? The sound plural of fa'iz. So nahnu ansarullah. Ansar. The only way we know what ansar is studying it, and you say, man, I don't know what ansar is. Is it plural? Is it singular? So I should figure this out. I'm going to turn this off. That's okay with you. I'll put it right here. So sound plural. You don't know if it's plural, if it's a broken plural, if it's single. So you learn by reading and studying with teachers and just practice and seeing it, and you see and you recognize that ansar comes from nasir or nasir, someone who helps. Ansar is plural, those who help. Nahnu ansar Allah, this is a statement of the companions of Isa alayhi salam, when they said, we are the helpers of Allah Ta'ala. Of course, Allah never needs help, but helpers of His deen. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ أَمْوَال is the plural of mal, or mal, and mal is money. Okay, so amwal is the plural of money, lots of money. So you only learn this through experience and practice and memorization, unfortunately. And then we have our Quranic vocabulary, and what I've done here is we started adding plurals whenever there's a single that has a plural that's helpful. Okay? So some things like hikmah. Hikmah is a concept. It doesn't have a plural, right? It means wisdom. So it doesn't need there's no wisdoms, just wisdom, right? So shaheed. What's the plural of shaheed? Shuhada. And so you've heard these two terms before, and now you can connect them as one is a single, one is a plural. That comes from practice. Malik or malak. Malak is an angel. What's the plural of angel? Malaika. It's a broken plural. Unfortunately, there's no practice with that. There's no form of that. Okay? So those are some practice ayat and words I want you guys to memorize, inshallah. So anytime you come across a singular form of a word, we'll try to give you its jama' form. Okay? So that you know. And that will come with practice and experience. You can break now, inshallah, to do the exercises amongst your groups. Try to make it 3 groups. Okay? So 3 big groups, so we can try to keep the differences less, so we can try to keep everyone apart. 3 groups for the next 20 minutes, inshallah. Let's do it 15 minutes. Do the next couple of pages of practice, inshallah. Surah Al-Asr will be a practice for the week, inshallah. So break up into 3 groups, and the sisters stick together. And in 15 minutes, inshallah, we'll go through the answers. Let me know if you have any questions. In Arab. So some of the questions some of the brothers came up to me regarding, inshallah, will be answered in the next 2 weeks. And really the next 2 weeks will be the miftah, or lughat al-Arabiya, or miftah is really the opening into, the key into understanding is understanding Arab. That's going to be the subject matter for the next couple of weeks, inshallah. So I pray that it will open up a lot of our understanding of things and at least make us inquisitive about what we're going to hear in the Quran. Salat al-Tarawih is coming up exactly 2 weeks, inshallah. So when we're reciting, when we're hearing it, as I said, I don't want us to sit down and say, is this ma'arifa, not ma'arifa, etc., etc. But what will be beneficial when we're paying attention to salah is if we hear that something is muslimuna or muslimina. Why is it muslimina? So the next couple of weeks will give us thought process as to why that is, inshallah. And why is it muslimani, not muslimaini? Abawani, abawaini. Or khafifatani, not khafifataini. And why is it Muslimun, not Muslimin or Musliman? So these things, inshallah, the beginning of that discussion will begin in the next couple of weeks, inshallah ta'ala, discussing al-i'rab. And inshallah with that, it will allow us to reflect and do more reflection of the Quran, inshallah, and allow us to now start to think about the Quran in a different light with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jayyid. So we're going to go through the exercises, inshallah, on page 30. The first exercise will be fill in the chart below with the appropriate word, which is single, dual, or plural. So you have the dual and plural form of it, and it'll give you it'll ask you to fill in the blank. And I tried to make it as such that if it's a broken plural, that you have enough signs to figure out what its singular is, or vice versa. Inshallah. Okay? So the first one is, and I left the translation on the left side because some of these may be new words not included in your Quranic vocabulary, and some of it's review. But the best thing, inshallah, is to cover the meaning at all times and try to figure out on your own. If you can't, look at the meaning last, inshallah. So the first word is plural form is kafirun, and the dual plural form is kafiran. Kafiran. What's the singular? Kafirun. The ones provided for you, the next one is muslimatun and muslimatani. Female Muslim, 2 female Muslims. What's the plural? Muslimatun, mashallah. The 2 given to you is awladun, which is the plural, and the singular is waladun. What's the dual? Waladani. It means boy, or child, or male child. The single is given to you, or salihun. What's the dual? Salihani. And what's the plural? If I left the plural open without any other signs, it's because it's a sound plural. Okay, so what's the sound plural of salih? Salihun. Okay, excellent. What about salihat? What's the sound plural? Salihat. MashaAllah. The word is book or kitabani. What's the single of kitabani? Kitabun. What's the plural? Kutubun. And I left it blank because you already learned it. Okay? So on these occasions, I left it for you because you've learned it already. So sadarani and sudur. What's the single? Sadr. And we know the sadr, even though it's sudur here, we know it's sadr because we have the dual. And the dual, you know what the single is from the dual. So sadr means heart or chest. Okay? Now the next exercise, give the male plural for the following. So it's likely that it is sound plural. Okay, male sound plural. So the word is Muslim. What's the sound plural? Muslimun. Mu'min. Aqil. What does aqil mean? Someone who has intellect. Hakim. Hakimun. Shahid. Shahidun. Sa'iq. Sa'iqun. Sa'iq is someone who drives or pushes forward. So in Surah Al-Qaf, that everyone is going to have a sa'iq. Someone's going to have someone driving them to the standing in front of Allah Ta'ala. Abid, Abidun, Hamid, Hamidun, Ta'ib, Ta'ibun. Ta'ib is someone who does tawbah. Ta'ib. Muslima, now this is the sound plural. Muslima, Muslimat. Everyone together. Mu'mina, Mu'minat. Aqila, Hakima, Hakimat. Shahida, Shahidat. Sa'iqa, Sa'iqat. Abida, Abidat. Hamida, Ta'iba, Ta'ibat. Now this next exercise is just practicing the vocabulary you've learned in the Quranic vocabulary. So even though you may not be able to translate the sentence, because in order to translate a sentence properly, you need to know grammar. But but the single individual words we'd like to translate. And try to be as specific as possible. For example, kalima, so, or that's not a good example. Ad-din, okay, never mind. I was about to say like, a single female, etc., right? Allah. And remember, whenever we discuss Allah in the study of Lugha, we say Lafz al-Jalala, and Allah means the God. It is the ma'rifa of Ilah. And we study Ilah today, it's one of the new words. Ilah means a God. Allah means the God. And there's no room for discussion. That's why Allah is a superior term than God. Because God, you can add gods, you can add goddess. But Allah, you cannot add Tanabuta, you cannot change it. So it's Allah. So it is the form, it is the name of Allah Ta'ala. Allah, Wahid. What does Wahid mean? Wahidun means one. Allah, Wahid, Allah is one. But I'm not asking you to translate the sentence, I'm asking you to translate the words here. Ash-Shahada, what does Ash-Shahada mean? It is a testimony, right? And in our case, it is the testimony of faith, of Iman. Kalima, what does Kalima mean? Word. Al-Malaika. Angels, the angels. Shuhada. Shuhada is the plural of Shaheed. So Shuhada is witnesses. So Malaika are witnesses. As-Salah, prayer. Wa means and. Okay? Az-Zakah. What is Az-Zakah? The charity that we give. So we all know these words, alhamdulillah. Ad-Din. Ad-Din means religion or way of life. Okay, as briefly translated. Kitabun, kitab. So this is all translated together because we should try to be able to translate it. So Kitabullahi nurun min as-sama. Kitab, what does kitab mean? Book, Allah, Allah. Kitabullahi, it means the book of Allah. Nurun. What does nur mean? Light. Min as-sama, min means from. As-sama, the sky. Nurun min as-sama, from the heaven. Al-Quran, we know is the Quran. Fariqun. Fariq, anytime you haven't studied these words, I put the translation there. Fariq is something to distinguish, to differentiate between two things. So Al-Quran, fariqun bayna, between al-haqq wal-batil. Al-haqq, what does al-haqq mean? The truth. What? Al-batil. Batil is wrong or falsehood, right? So Al-Qur'anu fariqun bayna al-haqqi wal-batili. The Quran is the distinguisher between what is right and what is wrong. So what determines what is right or wrong is not my own whims, my own desires, but it is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So next one, assignment. Fill out the following chart changing from form into the gender and number for the blank spaces. So so you may have one word and you can have its, if everything else is blank, you can make its feminine form. So the only word given to us on this chart is zalimani. So what's the male single of zalimani? Zalim. What is the male plural? It's sound obviously. Zalimun. What's the female single? Zalima. What's the female dual? Zalimatan. And then what's the female plural? Zalimat. Excellent. Same thing with all these. So there may be circumstances where the male form of a word takes on a broken plural, but the female form of the word takes on sound plural. So this is where things get crazy. Alright? So tullab, the only reason why it's left blank here is for our own experience. What is the single of tullab? Try to use our thought process a little bit. Talaba comes from it sounds like talaba is there. So what's the single form of it? Talib. Talib is someone who studies or seeks something. So you say talibul ilm, someone who's seeking knowledge or pursuing, trying to obtain something, ordering, right? Ordering that knowledge, so they're seeking something. So tullab is a broken plural of talib. What's the dual of talib? Taliban, right? And I'm not sure how Taliban got its name, the actual Taliban political organization, but it doesn't mean true Talib. So it's from Urdu version of it. Right? So Talibat. So Talibat, what's the dual of Talibat? Talibatan. And what's the single? Taliba. Okay? So now we have the next word, by the way, is translated as son or daughter. I put the wrong translation there. It's not student, it's a continuation. So it's son or daughter. So awlad is a broken plural for a single male child. So what's a single male child? Walad. So we've learned that, right? So walad, what's the dual of walad? Waladan. And now what's the female, what's a daughter? What's the word for daughter, which we've learned in the past? We have the plural here, which is banat. So what? So you would think that the single would be banat, right? Something simple like that. Unfortunately, it's not the case. So the actual word is bint. Bintun. Right? Bint. And what's the dual of bint? Two daughters? Bintan. Okay? So again, dual and single is easy. Plural gets a little bit fishy. Okay? But banat is there. In this particular case, it's actually a broken plural. It's not a sound feminine plural because the original word does not have ta marbuta. It's actually an actual ta. You actually pronounce the ta. Bintun. It's not binah. Right? It's bintun. So one who bows is the meaning. The single male is raki'. So now with that you can do everything. Alhamdulillah. So what's the dual of raki'? Raki'an. And then what's the plural? Raki'un. What's the female single? Raki'ah. What's the dual of female? Raki'atan. And notice the plural? Raki'at. And as-sajid, same thing. As-sajid, what's the dual? As-sajidan. What's the plural? As-sajidun. What's the female single? As-sajida. Means someone who does sujood. And what's the dual? As-sajidan. What's the plural? As-sajidat. As-sajidatan, as-sajidat. Right? And then last but not least, khashi'ah. Khashi'atan is the only one given to us. So now from that you can derive its single female, which is what? Khashi'ah. And from that you can derive its single male. Because you know it's just as a tab al-muta. So it's a single male. Khashi'un. So from all that you can now answer the rest. So what's the dual of male? Khashi'un, khashi'an. What's the plural? Khashi'un. What's the plural of khashi'ah? Khashi'atun. Is khashi'at. Excellent. Since we have 2 more minutes, we can go to Surah Al-Asr. And what I have here, the assignment is to take a separate sheet of paper, identify all the asma, and then give the 3 characteristics. Is it ma'arifa? Is it nakira? Is it definite or indefinite? Then answer is it male or female? Then answer is it single or plural or plural? Okay? So al-asr. Ism, fi'l, or harf? Ism. How do we know it's ism? See, now we're going back to what we studied the first week.
Alif Lam.
Alif Lam. Now we know it's ism. We take it out. We write it in a separate sheet. There's space here probably to write it here. Al-asr. It is an ism. Is it definite or indefinite? Definite. Why? Alif Lam. It is male or female? Are there signs? Remember the question is, are there signs of femininity? Is there ta marbuta? Is there alif hamza? Is there alif maqsoor? None of those things. Therefore it is male. And then the question is it single, dual, or plural? So it's not the sound plural, we know that. And it's not dual, we know that. Whether it is single or broken plural, we only know that through practice. But in this case, it is single. Does that make sense? The thought process now? Inna is a harf, okay? So I'll put that aside. Al-insan. Ism. So ism. Okay, now we take it out. Al-insan. Is it ma'arifa or nakira? Definite or indefinite? Definite. Male or female? Male. Why? Because there's no signs of femininity. And when we know the meaning of it, it's not intrinsically female. Remember we talked about walad and bint? Walad is a male, because it means boy. You can't have a boy, female boy, right? So it has its opposite, which is bint. Okay? You could say, mawlud and mawluda, that's a different story. But walad and bint. So in this case, it's the same thing. Ins is actually a male, a human being. It means human being. And that's why in these circumstances, I ask you, I give you the citation. So I say, go and utilize the translation. Because the purpose of this is not in translating yet. The purpose of this is understanding the grammar. The translation will come in time. So, al-insan, it means a single human being. Male human being. How do we know it's that and it's not a plural? We don't know. It's We know that it's not sound plural, and we know that it's not dual. Okay? We know that it's not dual because even though it has and at the end of it, next couple of weeks we'll learn that duals have special signs when they take on the form of nasab and jar, take on particular grammatical statuses. In this particular case, the word is in the grammatical status of nasab. And the reason why it's in the grammatical state of nasab is because it follows inna. And you'll learn all these things in time. And that's why they're all tied together. So al-insana, you may think, okay, maybe it is dual. But why is it not dual? Because I told you, every single dual ends in ani. Every single dual ends in ani. And you'll learn later that it's in the state of nasab. And it's na, fatha, as a sign of nasab. Okay? So al-insana, excellent. Lafi, la, lam, lam, ism fi'la harf. Harf. Fi, ism fi'la harf. We know that it's not a ism because it doesn't have the signs. We know that it's not a fi'l because it doesn't look like kataba, fa'ala, wa hakada. So we know it's a harf. If it's not an ism, it's not a fi'l, it's a harf. That's the rule. Khusrin, khusr. Ism fi'l or harf?
Ism.
Fi'l. Why do you say it's fi'l?
I know the meaning.
Does anyone know why it is not fi'l?
It's not.
It has
It's
tanween.
not noun
Why is it not a noun?
because I don't find an
Okay, what are the other signs of noun?
It has tanween.
Tanween.
Tanmania.
So it has a tanween on it, right? So it's ism. It's not just alif lam, it's tanween and ta marbuta. So it has a tanween there, so it is ism. Okay, so we take it out. Is it ma'arifa or nakira? Is it definite or indefinite? Indefinite. How do we know that? Because it has tanween. It does not have alif lam. And then the last is a single, dual, or plural. So we know that it's not a plural sound. We know that it's not dual. It could either be single or it can be broken plural. But we just know that it's single because I'm telling you. Okay? And you now know it. So the next time you see it, you know that it's single. Okay? إلا هذا حرف الاستثناء. Okay? حرف الاستثناء. So it's a type of harf that has a special usage in the language. الذين, this is actually an ism, but it's a special type of ism. It's called ism al-ishaq, ism al-mawsul. It's a special type of ism. So it doesn't fulfill the other rules of ism. آمنوا, ism fi'la harf. Excellent, mashallah. We know that it's not ism. It may be harf and it may be fi'l, but we know that it's fi'l because you're going to learn the categories of fi'l and how they work. What is a harf? Amilu is a fi'l. I'm going to go through this quickly. As-salihat. As-salihat. Ism fi'l harf. Ism. Is it definite or indefinite? Definite because it's alif lam. Is it male or female? We know it's female and it's a plural female. Why? Because it has salihat. What's the single of salihat? Saliha. What's the male of saliha? Salih. So then learning male, female, etc., you now learned one word in the Quran. You say, I know what salihat means. Let's go look it up in the translation that I read. Salihat means female believers, female righteous people, or people who do righteousness. And then I'm like, oh, okay, because I know to turn it into salihat, salihat, salihatan. I know how to turn it into salih, salihan, and salihun. You just now, by learning one word and looking it up in the dictionary or looking it up in the translation, you've learned 5 other words. This is why this is important, inshallah. Okay? وَتَوَاصَوْا is a fi'l, harf in the fi'l. بِالْحَقِّ, ba is harf jar. Al-haq is ism. It is ma'arifa. It is mufrad. And it is mudhakkar. Okay? And you use all the Arabic terms on purpose. But it is ism, it is definite, it is single, and it is masculine. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And sabr is the same category of al-haq. So inshallah, next week we have off because I'll be unfortunately. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This oneness, khashia, singular.
I'm sorry?
Is there a difference while writing the singular and the plural?
Is there a difference of writing it?
Yeah.
In what sense exactly?
Khashia, we write the same thing.
Khashi'a and khashi'atan, khashi'at, same thing. And then khashi'un, khashi'an, and khashi'un.
Khashia is the singular.
Yes.
I'm not saying about those. I'm saying about the plural. Plural, you can write again khashi'at.
The plural is khashi'at. Any other questions? So next week, inshallah, I'll be traveling to Chicago, and then the following weekend will be Ramadan. We're going to be continuing in Ramadan. This, alhamdulillah, it's the morning. Hopefully we'll all be fresh in the morning, inshallah. And there will be more blessing, inshallah, in studying Talab al-Ilm in the month of Ramadan, especially since this is for the book of the Quran. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. جزاكم الله خير.